Hey guys, it's Marina with Artworthy Life, where I teach Christ-centered art journaling that gets you into God's Word every day. Happy Friday, everybody. We are going to jump right into a fun art journal page that's inspired by one of the verses in Psalm 119. If you do not already know, inside the Artworthy Journal Club, we are going through the chapter in Psalm 119. It is the longest chapter in the Bible, and it's organized by Hebrew letters. So that's inside the club, but I thought we would just take one of those verses and art journal it today. Hi, Valerie. Good morning. So I'm going to read, first I'm going to read the verse that we're getting into, and then we're going to jump right in. So this is from Psalm 119, verse 1. And the verse says, "Blessed are the undefiled in the way, who walk in the law of the Lord. And blessed are they that keep his testimonies and that seek him with the whole heart." That's actually two verses, verse 1 and 2. And I love those verses because they're just such a great introduction to the rest of the chapter, which is basically entirely about following the commands of the Lord, the law of the Lord, following the Lord his way and his word. So I just think it's beautiful that it starts off that way and starts off telling us to seek him with the whole heart. So we're going to create an art journal page that is inspired by that. And while I am grabbing my tracer for that, you guys should tell me if you have ever read through Psalm 119. And if you have, do you remember any specific verses from it? Alrighty, so today I'm going to use my graphite paper and this tracer. I have a really fun tracer that is shaped like some hands. Hey Sharon, I'm so glad to see you. Hi Leslie Ann. I saw your niece yesterday. It was so fun. And her puppy and her kiddos. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and trace this on here like this. And you could freehand some hands if you don't have our tracers, if you're not in the journal club, but there are also lots of images online you could print out, and this is just going to represent the hands of God. So I'm going to take I like to use a mechanical pencil because when I'm tracing with a regular pencil, the line is often a little fatter than I want it to be. So I like to use a mechanical pencil like this one, and then trace the outside. Sharon says, a couple months ago, I wrote the whole psalm out through the scripture writing through the year group. Oh, I love it. She wrote it out over the month. Oh, that's awesome. Valerie says, hello, or you can join Marina's. Yes, thank you. Okay, so go ahead and trace the outside edge of the hands. And anytime you're using a tracer, just know that you don't have to trace every single line. Tracers could be anything. It could be a reference photo. It could be a picture you took. It could be something you found online. And just a good rule of thumb is to trace only the lines that you really need. Trace the lines that are critical to the painting. If it's not critical to the painting, try not to trace it because you don't want to have to erase it later. And I'm using graphite paper, which is like carbon paper. And so that's just transferring the image onto my art journal page right now. And one other thing to just keep in mind if you are getting a tracer online or whatever is be careful of other people's artwork. If you are using a graphic or a photo or something like that, make sure you have permission to use it, and don't duplicate it for selling if it's someone else's artwork. But obviously, if it's something that I've created, I'm creating it to teach you guys, so you're more than welcome to use it as inspiration, as long as you're not duplicating it to sell. But that is why we imitate. We imitate so we can learn, and that's a really, really important part of learning to paint is imitation. Okay, I'm just making sure I got all my lines here on my hands. There are a few more that I missed, so I'm just going to freehand those in. A few lines like that. So there's my hands, and I know that's probably a little hard for you guys to see because I got a bright light going on. Whoops, let me don't know if I can shadow that. There we go. But as I paint, you'll start to see more of it. So for today's art journal, I'm going to create this set of hands and then draw some little hearts that I can write in some things that this verse tells us to seek God with our whole heart. So for today's art journal page, I really want to create a page that reminds me to seek him. So I'm going to draw some heart shapes, and those are going to give me a place to put some things that maybe I'm not seeking God about or that I need to seek God about. And when I feel like I have prayed about those and now I'm seeking God, I will draw a little line to connect them. So I'm just going to draw some hearts out here. Just some penciled in. Actually, I may not even pencil those in. I might just, oh, yeah, I'll go ahead and pencil them in. Okay, so I'm going to do them a little bigger. I'm making my hearts nice and round and varying sizes, so they kind of look like they're floating. I'm making mine like short, squatty heart shapes. I'm going to draw a few over here. Maybe one right here. Hopefully I don't have this many things to write, but you know, you can always search your heart for things that you need to seek God about. That verse says seek him with the whole heart. So you can, if you're following along, you can be thinking about, what do I need to hand over to God that I'm holding on to myself? Okay, so now I'm just going to go right into painting the background. That's what I was wondering about. Do I want the background to be colored or do I want it not to be? I think I do. So I'm going to do a blue, light blue. And the only reason I'm picking that color is because my opposite page, let me show you my opposite page. Let's see if you can see it. This is my opposite page, and it's from one of our prior art journal demos. And it has a lot of blue in it, so I want it to kind of coordinate. You don't have to coordinate your pages. That's just something I like to do. So I'm going to choose a blue, a fun blue. Let's see. And I'm also using, let me go ahead and put my supplies up here if you want to know what kind of paint palette we use. This is the Komorebi Mozart set. I love it. And we've been using it like crazy inside the group. So much, so much. So I'm going to use the azurite blue from that, and I'm going to add a little bit of green. I think I'm going to use brilliant green to make that a little bit more turquoise. So there's the color I have right there in the middle. I don't need a ton of it because I'm going to basically water it down a ton. And for this background, I just noticed I have a little smudge here. If you ever have a splatter of paint or something on a page, you can, if it's watercolor, you can scrub it out by adding just a little bit of water and kind of scrubbing it. I just noticed it must have splattered when I did the other page. So I'm going to clean that up real quick. And you can see it basically erases most of it, if not all of it. It just depends on how harsh the splotch was. When I want to do a background that fades out to nothing, I start off with clear water, and we're going to do the wet in wet technique if you haven't seen us do that before. But I want the outside edges to be totally dissolved. That's not the right word. Dissipated, whatever. I want the outside edge to go completely to white, but I want the inside edge to be colored, and I don't want any harsh, what we call tide lines, where the paint comes up to that line and just makes a crisp, hard edge. I just kind of want it to fade to white. So to do that, we have to start with a page that is completely wet, just with clear water. So I'm going to wet this whole page, and when you do this, in fact, I could be using a bigger brush for this. When you do this, you want your brush to be as big as possible so you can go quickly, and you want to cover the whole page really fast. So I'm going to go ahead and just quickly cover this whole page, and I'm going around the hearts. I'm just putting a lot of water down on the page and sweeping it around. And this is clear water, so you're not seeing color. You're probably seeing just shine, if anything. I'm going to go between the hands up here, over here on the side. I actually wouldn't necessarily need to do that part right then, but I'm going to do it now anyway, and do it all this way. And go around the fingers. You want to be careful around these fingers because this is going to create an edge for you to work with. So you really want to paint your water as if you're actually painting. So be conscious of the lines that you're drawing, because when you drop some color in, which is the wet and wet technique, we're going to be dropping some color in, your color is going to run right up to those edges. So those are the edges that your page is going to have at the end of the day. So just make sure you're not being haphazard with your water. It actually is the edge of your paint line. So be as careful or as not careful as you want to be. You don't have to have perfect lines, but if you want lines that look crisp and nice, just be aware that's where they're going to come from, is this step right here. So my whole page is damp. I want to sweep up any big puddles, and you can kind of lean to the side to see if you've missed any spots. I missed a spot there and there. Let's see if I can get that nice and wet. Okay, now my whole page is wet right now. And I'm going to get some blue that I've already mixed up on my page and start dropping in some lighter blues. Now I need my blue to be pretty pigmented in order to drop it in, because if I start dropping in color that's really light, it'll just be more water because I've added more water to mine. So now I'm just going to drop in this color, and as I go, my color will just start to spread. You can see it spreading right there. I don't know if you can tell that on camera. You should be able to see that. It's just going to start spreading to wherever my water stopped. So it won't go to the hands unless I've kind of crossed over the edge a little bit, but it will spread out all across the page. So I'm going to go ahead and do some blue around the hearts and around the hands. And then we're going to keep dropping this in. And I want my blue to kind of fade out to the edges, but I don't want it to go all the way up to the edge. So I'm going to drop it in close to the center of the page and then just kind of leave it to fade out on its own. So maybe come around this heart, maybe to the edge of this heart here, but not all the way to the edges. Not all the way to the edges. So kind of cloudy. And you can use a bigger brush. I'm going to use a bigger brush with a little bit of water on it to soften those edges that are blending out there. But you can see how that water is creating a soft edge rather than a harsh edge. Now I'm going to drop in some darker color, and that darker color is going to be more pigmented than just watered down color. And we're going to go around these edges again. I'm going to create the shadows that I want to see around these hands at the end of the day. So I'm going to just go around with some darker color, and I'm doing this while it's wet, because if I wait until it dries, I'll have a real harsh line where I'm painting in, and I don't want that. So I'm going to do a little bit around this heart as well. Make that heart have a nice edge. I'm being careful to actually paint the heart shape, because that's my edge of my heart right there. And I can kind of play with the shape of the heart until it looks good. But you just want to work a little quickly because your color is waiting to run to the edges. So if you slow down too much, your color will start to dry or create those lines that we don't want. So the edge of my painting is already starting to dry, so I'm going to kind of stay away from those areas because they're starting to get nice and settled in. So I'm just going to work closer to these dark areas where I'm adding shadow. Might put a little bit of shadow in this heart here. I'm just going to bring that in. And I'm really just playing right now. I want to see what the color will do. I'm going to add a little bit of green maybe. Add a little green here. I'm just creating some kind of background so that my page isn't totally white like it can be. There we go. So, oh, that's kind of fun how that's running down this way. This is wet, so that's coming down with a little line. So it's kind of a personality of its own. When you let the water just flow, it goes, goes, goes. Okay, now I'm going to use a wet brush and just blend in these darker greens that are a little more harsh. Not a very wet brush because I don't want to put too much water on the page and create some cauliflowering, which is when the water pushes out too far and creates puddles and ripples and things. So, but I do want to blend that green in a little bit. And I'm going to pick up some of the color, create some light spots. And now I'm just going to monitor this. I'm going to monitor my edges and things and see how wet is this? Is this too wet? Is it going to dry the way I want it to? And so I'm just kind of looking around. Are there any really wet areas that I need to sweep up? Is everything drying at a good rate? Do I need to help it along? Do I need to blow on it? And then just kind of playing around with it until it's settling in. So that's settling in really nicely. I have some hearts out here that don't quite touch the blue, and that's good. That means I started in the center. I did my little blue area, but now my blue is fading out toward the edge nicely, and it's not a harsh transition. Just noticed I didn't put blue back here, and I want a little tiny bit of blue behind the hands there. Okay. Okay, so I'm just using a little bit of a wet brush to do this shading here, mostly because I don't want it to be a line. I just want a little bit of blending there. Okay, so that looks good. That's a good background for our hands. And now, typically you'd want to let this dry all the way before you started doing anything else. But since we're live, I'm going to go ahead and keep going. Let me move this banner so that you can see a little bit more of the page. And I'm going to go ahead and do this number. There we go. So as we paint in the hearts, I'm going to choose colors that are still going to coordinate with this page over here. But they don't necessarily have to be only those colors. So I'm going to pick some like tropical, beachy kind of colors. First color I'm going to use is neon pink. And I have a little bit of pink left over on my palette that I'm going to mix it with. And that is actually crimson. So pink and crimson mixed together, and it has a touch of white in it to keep it thick. That's going to be a nice happy color to have on an opposite page like that. Plus, pink is a great color for hearts. I'm going to start painting this in, and I think my heart is pretty much dry. So I'm going to go almost up to the edge, leave a little bit of white line. And then as I paint this heart in, I'm also just going to leave some white space behind. So the heart kind of has a little bit of a shine to it. And that's just going to be in the upper right-hand corner. There's the heart shape, like that. And I'll probably take a little bit more crimson and just drop in some darker color around the edges. And that'll create that round little puffy heart shape. While it dries, it will be a little less smooth looking. So later I might come in with a fine tip pen and really make that edge look nice. Good morning, Daniel. Thanks for watching. So we have a little bit of extra pink on the palette. So I like to, if I'm going to use a color, it's a good idea, at least in my mind, to use it more than once on the page, unless you are specifically making like a rainbow and you only want it once. So I'm going to pick another little heart and put it on that as well. Here's a little heart here. And I'm going to put a little shine on the right side of the heart as well, so that they kind of match. Using a massive brush for this because I'm terrible at switching brushes when I need to switch brushes, but you can use a smaller brush if you'd like. The reason I oftentimes am holding a larger brush longer is not just because I forget to switch, it's also because bigger brushes hold more paint, so I can paint more brush strokes without having to pick up more paint. So I can paint more area before I have to go back to my palette and get some more. So it's kind of up to you if you want to try to use a bigger brush. But that's one of the reasons why, especially when I'm doing an art journal page, I will oftentimes not switch my brush as often as I think I need to. I may not switch to a smaller one just because I'm going quickly and I'm cruising through with a lot of paint on my brush. And it's fun to move quickly like that. Okay, now I am going to switch. I'm going to use a brush that I don't have a list for, but this is a Princeton Velvet Touch Long brush. It's a very smooth tipped brush and it's pointy. So I'm going to use that one because if I don't switch brushes with this one, it doesn't really matter because the tip is so pointy, I can get a nice fine edge. So I'm going to get a little bit more red on my brush, and I'm going to go deeper on the edges of the pink hearts. A little deeper, and I'm doing this all before they're dry. Get all the shading done before they're totally dry. This one is a little bit dry on the left, but I can blend that in. So I'm going to use a clean wet brush now that I have the paint down and blend that in. I just want that nice peachy color. And look how dark I'm going with my red. That was almost fully pigmented red right here. To create a very thin, you could use a liner brush for this, a very thin edge of dark, dark, dark shadow. Look how that makes the heart look round. I think that's really nice. Little floating hearts. And now I'm going to do the same thing on the other two little hearts. Just give them a nice dark edge. And I basically put the dark color down, then I clean my brush, get some water on it, a clean wet brush, and pull that color toward the center a little bit. That way I'm not spreading more dark color around. I'm just smoothing out what's already on the page. You get a little tiny bit more. And this is what I meant by I can use the very fine tip of this without having to switch brushes. Just a tiny bit more red. I'm going to use the red especially to emphasize the pointy part at the top and the pointy part at the bottom. Like that. Clean wet brush can kind of sweep it in like that. In fact, I'm going to do that on this bottom edge as well. So notice that point is a little hard to see. A lot of people are shy about using dark colors, but your dark colors are make all of your light colors pop. So I'm going to add those dark reds just to help that along. And look how dark I can put my red on like this. I can put that real dark edge onto the heart. As long as I work quickly and come back right away. Right now, with a clean wet brush, I can blend that in, and it will not come across that dark or that harsh. It'll blend into the heart. Like that. I'm going to leave a little bit of the light pink. I think that's cute. Ta-da! This is a little bit bumpy of a heart. I think it's really sweet. Excuse me. Okay, before I do the other hearts, I'm going to work on the hands. Now over here, the hand got a little bit wet, so I'm going to scrub out that thumb a little. If you wanted it kind of abstract, you could leave that, I guess. Doesn't look bad, but I want to have a little bit more skin tone over there. I'm going to leave just the edge of it. That'll still look kind of nice. Okay, I'm going to start with the pink that we already have just because it's on my palette and it's taking up room. So basically a light pink that's crimson, and I'm going to add a skin tone to it. I'm going to use yellow ochre. Mix that in. And then white to keep my paint thick. Add a little bit more So I kind of use a mix of a sandy color and red to make a light peachy color. Sometimes I like to add a little bit of brown so it's not so rosy. And then white, and that's how I create a skin tone. You could also go darker if you want more olivey skin. You could add more brown. So just think about whatever you want to do. Okay, now I'm going to add this super light color, watered down quite a bit, all across these hands. And as I'm painting this in, I'm leaving little bits of white space, kind of where the folds of the hand are. Because I'm going to paint this all the way in, but I'm not going to make it a very detailed painting. In fact, I might decide to outline it. I don't know yet. So the white is going to help all of those tracer edges show up a little bit more. So like in between the fingers, I'm leaving a little bit of white space so it looks like individual fingers. On the edge of this thumb, I'm going to do the same thing and just keep cruising along with my paintbrush. Do the folds of the hand again. And then all the way to the edge like that. There we go. Now I want to, just like I did with the hearts, I want to create some shadow while this is wet. So I'm going to get some brown, darken up my color that I already have, and just come in along the edges with brown. I'm going to go along the finger edges. And if it's wet, it'll blend out. If it's not wet, it'll have a hard time blending. So just make sure you do this while your painting is still wet. I'm adding it kind of dark and harsh and then coming back in and watering it down. I'm going to do the edge of this hand here. And then the edges of the wrist, you really want to do a darker brown because that'll make the wrist look round. Just on the edges like that. I'm going to keep the palm, this part of the palm, nice and bright because that's usually where the most light will hit. So I'm only going to shadow the little creases and folds there. So we're just going to continually add layers. And for this, it's going to be more like a sketch, so I'm not going to blend all of my lines perfectly. But that's the beauty of watercolor, is it kind of looks fun when there's edges and lines and things. So we're just going to keep adding, especially under any of the folds of the hand, we're going to keep adding shadow. And I'm using just number 52 brown for that. Going in a little darker, a little darker, a little darker. No perfect brush strokes here. So I'm going to look at my tracer and see it looks like this hand on the right hand side is in front of the other. So I'm going to put the shadow on the left, the hand that's on the left. See if I can create an edge there so that they kind of look like one's on top of the other. Try to make that look a little bit more round. And I'm just going to keep dropping in dark brown into that little edge until it's as dark as I want it to be. So I go straight to the palette and get heavily pigmented brown and then drop that in. There's my edge. So I'm making that right pinky come over top of the other by painting it in instead of the other one. Okay, now I'm going to keep adding browns. They're darker to kind of match the brown I just added to that hand. And all your shadows should be consistent across your painting, so that's why I'm adding a little bit more to the rest of the area. Now I'm noticing my painting is kind of all beige looking. So I want to add a little bit of pink to my brown now to warm it up a little. So I added just a little bit of crimson. Oops, that's still kind of beige or brown. So I'm going to keep adding a little bit of pink. Okay, and I'm going to add a little white. Keep my paint thick. Valerie says your art is so lovely. Thank you so much, Valerie. Okay, let's see. I'm just going to kind of eyeball these hands. I don't want them to look too frumpy. You know, I want them to be a little bit crisp on the edges. So I'm going to try to add some good smooth lines that are going to smooth out the painting. So I'm using this darker color to create a better line on that edge. And I'm going to start making the little creases in the thumbs and in the fingers. Let's see. There we go. See how when you go darker, sometimes you can get that to look a little bit more realistic. And your painting doesn't have to look realistic, but it will help it. This will help it have its nice shadow lines and things like that. You can tell these hands aren't perfect, but they're just fun. All right, so now I'm going to do this side with the same shadows. And I want to bring these shadows a little further up to where the creases in the hand were, so that the fingers don't look too short. And then add that reddish brown to this hand as well. So just layer, 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 layer. Keep adding layers. Little creases in the hands are fun. I think the darkest area probably would be between the hands, so I'm going to keep that nice and dark. And just let the shadows fill in the rest of the area. I go right along the edge of this thumb with some brown so that I can see that edge. Okay. I'm going to just take a wet brush and smooth out some of the harsh lines. And now I'm going to let it dry because it's getting close, but I want to be able to add dark shadow without affecting the lines that are currently there, or maybe I will outline it completely. And so that needs to be dry so that when I drop in darker color or use a darker color on top of it, it's not bleeding into the color that's already there. So I'm going to let that dry and then we'll come back to those. Valerie says, I use the word recognizable rather than realistic for my art. I love that. That is such a good word. Yes, I concur. If you can recognize it, it's good enough. Good enough. All right, so for the remaining hearts, I'm going to use the sandy color that I used on this painting here. So that was a mixture of yellow ochre and probably some brown too, but I'm just going to use yellow ochre and whatever's left on my palette. A little bit of brown probably. maybe add a little bit of, well, I might try it just with yellow ochre. I might add white, but we'll see how it goes just like this. And then paint in these hearts. Same way, I'm going to leave a little white space behind on the right-hand side, a little shine on the heart. And then maybe around the edges have some dark. A little bit of shine on the right-hand side. And just think about, like, my color is always going to dry a little different than the color that you put down. So if you're doing one heart here and you're not sure if you're going to like the color, let that one dry or work on just the one, and then adjust accordingly. If you need to go darker to start with, or you need to go lighter to start with, you can do that. The cool thing is, over here when I used blue and the sandy yellow ochre color, it kind of faded into the green and created almost a green color in between right here. So because I used a blue background on these little hearts, they're doing the same thing, almost like the blue is washing into them like a wave. All right, so now they're all wet still, and I can drop in some darker shading. I'm going to use a heavier pigmented yellow ochre and maybe a little bit of brown. Actually, I'm going to grab this black. There we go. That'll darken it up. And I'm just going to go around their edges very thin, especially because I'm working with yellow. I don't really want to, like a yellow color, you don't really want it to be muddy. So I'm going to go around maybe on the point of the heart here, the little V at the bottom, where that's going to help the shape be more obvious, more recognizable, like Valerie said. The little point there and a little point there. And now I'm going to clean my brush very well because I don't want that muddy color at all to go crazy. And just use a clean brush to fade that in. And that just means I'm coming along the edge where I just put it and blending it in a little bit, helping it blend so that it doesn't dry a stark brown crisp line right there. Don't want a brown heart. I want a yellow sandy looking heart. And then we can just do the bottom edge the same way, kind of pull the color out and around, and there's our little heart shapes. I think I can go even deeper with the yellow ochre color, so I'm going to go more saturated with it. Just take that color, very pigmented on my brush, and come along the edge just to make the edge look nice and yellow. So I'm going back over where I just was with that deep, deep yellow. And I'm going to go around this edge right here with deep yellow and along this edge as well. There we go, just like that. And around the outside edge. Okay, so there's our little heart shapes. That matches the other side now. Now I'm going to take a look at these hands. They're looking a little bit muddy, but they're getting there and they're drying. I'm going to smooth this out because I see a tide line happening here. Some cauliflowering. Okay, so with this, I'm going to go ahead and outline because I could do some brown to be the very, very edges, but because I have some lettering over here, that'll kind of offset it nicely and it'll create crisp edges that I think will look really nice. Let's see. I'm going to grab a Fud pen. I have several kinds of Fud pens, but I think I'm going to use this Soft Tip. Let's see. This is Soft Tip Fudenosuke pen by Tombow. Valerie says, thumbs up. Yay. Okay. And then I want to look at my tracer. Just keep your tracer nearby if you've painted already, because sometimes your lines on your tracer can shift as you're painting. You may not remember where your lines are. So I kind of like to keep that nearby, especially if I'm not doing something from memory. I'm doing something from an image. Keep your reference photo nearby, whatever. I'm going to set mine over here so I can see it. Actually, so you can see it as well. Right there. So make sure your painting is dry before you do this too, because you don't want your color bleeding out. But I like to have my lines, let's see if this is actually working. Yeah. Try not to draw on a wet page. That ruins pens. I like to have my lines not perfect. My lines should be somewhat broken, like I'm sketching. And I'm just going to go real careful around these fingers. And the fingers are funny. If you make them too drawn in, sometimes they actually look less real. So I'm just being real careful with these lines. And I'm going to go around like this. And then do that little curve at the end. In fact, you almost don't even have to do the tip of the finger to make it look okay. I'm going to go all the way along this edge here. And then real careful out here. Also notice, I'm not necessarily perfectly drawing between the blue and the peach. My lines are loose and not following the edges perfectly. That just makes it look way more freehand. So even though I didn't draw this freehand, you can still get that freehand look. Just by being careful with the lines that you draw at this point. I'm going to go real thin with these lines. I don't want super harsh lines here. And then around this edge, like that. And then come up around the back end of the hand.
It really depends on whether that is actually enforced or not.
And I have the nail bed here. I can just really lightly hint at that without drawing the whole line in. And there's the right hand. So once I have the right hand in, I can come back. Now that my left hand is dry. Notice I drew a little line, then skipped a little bit. Now I'm coming and drawing the other line. That just, when your lines aren't connected very strongly, it makes your painting look softer. It doesn't look like a coloring book that's super harsh. And you'll notice I'm almost drawing as if I'm painting, picking up and letting my brush kind of swish away, which also with a FUD pen, with a brush pen like this, creates something like a brush stroke, which looks looser, and it gives it, the lines are varying widths, which can really add to the softness of the painting. So even if you're not freehanding, you may not realize there's better ways to trace too. And there's ways of optimizing your tracing ability. I'm drawing these little lines here, which are
No, I don't think it is. I think we could ask for our money back. But with all the money I put into that house, not to mention I can't buy it.
okay. Let's see. We're gonna do little. I'm kind of recreating these little folds right here, and those look like little waves. So I'm just following what the tracer is getting at, but trying to keep my lines a little softer than the tracer. It's a little one here too. Okay. And that looks pretty good. I don't think I need to go too much more detailed than that. I'm going to do the same thing around the hearts, just because this is really well outlined. I'm going to go ahead and do some little edges along the hearts as well. You don't even have to outline the whole heart, just in the darkest shadows of the heart. I'm going to add some black so that it looks nice and crisp around those edges. So now, while I'm finishing this up, I want you guys to be thinking about, like, think about the verse that we just read, seeking God with the whole heart. And as I said at the beginning, this page is based on that verse. And just think about, especially if you're following along, what are some things that you need to hand over to God that you have not yet? And you can label these hearts with those things, or you can just leave them blank and know in your mind what they actually are and what they represent. And then take some time to pray over those areas of your life. And when you feel like you have taken the time to hand it over to the Lord, go ahead and take either a black pen or a white pen. Let me see if this white pen will show up well enough. We'll see about that. And connect your heart to the hands like this. And that'll just represent you handing that area of your life over to the Lord, giving him full authority and dominion over that area, and just letting him take care of you in that way. And I'm going to go ahead and draw a little shadow on this line, like that. So think about those things. Think about what you could be handing over to the Lord. And I'm going to write in our verse, which is, I'm not going to write the whole verse. I'm just going to say, seek him with the whole heart. And I'm going to put it up in this corner right here. I'm going to do a calligraphy, the word heart in calligraphy first, like this. Like that. I did a little heart at the end of that. Isn't that cute? And I'm just going to say, seek him with the whole heart. So I'm thinking about how I could do that. I'm going to go whole right here.
Hey, Dad.
Whole
How are
heart. So I'm going to say,
better?
Seek.
Yeah.
Seek. Oops, if I can spell properly. All right. I forgot my disclaimer. This is the part of the show where Marina stops talking, because if Marina talks while she writes, she misspells words on live. So I'm misspelling, but I will fix it in a minute. S-E-E-K. You can see my little line where I try to draw a K. Seek him. And I'll say with the whole heart, which I like. And I'm going to do little quotes. Do a dot, 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 since it's not the whole verse. Little quotes down here. And then my verse reference is Psalm 119. Verse 2. And I'll say 2b, since it's the second half of the verse. Like that. Seeking with the whole heart. This is one of the reasons I love the Fud pen. If you notice, I didn't switch pens. I could have been using a fine tip for the rest of that, but look how nicely that pen does. You can get a nice fine line. Another reason I love that pen. Where I accidentally drew a K, I'm going to take my white pen and just draw over that line. Ta-da! Done. Fixed. Erased it. You can always fix things. I'm going to come along this white line and just give it a little bit more emphasis like that so I can see it. And then come even darker with the white. These white pens are nice, but they aren't as dark as I'd like them to be. So I oftentimes have to come in and do a little bit more white. But that is all I have for you guys today. So this is our Psalm 119 art journaling page. And throughout this month, I'm going to be doing a little bit more of the verses from Psalm 119. So Valerie says, I feel so inadequate when I watch you freehand letters. It's all practice, Valerie. And if you feel like they're kind of wonky or weird, do it on a separate sheet of paper and put it down. I really sometimes, I mean, obviously I just messed up on this. Sometimes I feel like mine are really wobbly. In this case, I would have probably drawn lines to make it straighter if I had more time or whatever. But it's just a matter of practicing and also just breathing and letting yourself not have to have everything perfect. Let it be recognizable, not perfect, right? But a lot of times the lettering is the final touch. So it's always a little nerve-wracking when you put that on. And so try it in pencil first. That would be my number one advice. Do it in pencil, then come back and do your pen. And that way you can erase a little if you need to. Alrighty, thank you, Valerie. She says they are beautiful. That was really, really fun. If you enjoyed that, please give it a thumbs up and share it with someone that you think would enjoy getting some encouragement from the Word of God through artwork. We do art journaling every Friday at 10:30 a.m. Pacific Time, 12:30 Central, and 1:30 Eastern, right here at Artworthy Life, which streams to Facebook and to YouTube. So I hope you join us next week, and we will see you then. God bless.